The following podcast by Fusion Family Wealth, LLC, Fusion, is intended for general information purposes only. No portion of the podcast serves as the receipt of or as a substitute for personalized investment advice from Fusion or any other investment professional of your choosing. Please see additional important disclosure at the end of this podcast. A copy of Fusion's current written disclosure brochure discussing our advisory services and fees is available upon request or at www.fusionfamilywealth.com.
Welcome to the Crazy Wealthy Podcast with your host, Jonathan Blau. Whether you're just starting out or are an experienced investor, join Jonathan as he seeks to illuminate and demystify the complexities of making consistently rational financial decisions under conditions of uncertainty. He'll chat with professionals from the advice world, entrepreneurs, executives, and more to share fresh perspectives on making sound decisions that maximize your wealth. And now, here's your host.
Good morning to everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Crazy Wealthy Podcast. I have a very special guest today, Victoria, also known more commonly in the Long Island community, particularly as Vicki Schneps. And we're going to talk about her journey from school teacher to media industry mogul, because that's what just came to my mind. So I'm calling her that. So in any event, Vicki, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today on the Crazy Wealthy Podcast.
Well, we're going to have some fun, Jonathan. Wonderful to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
It's my pleasure and privilege to have you. So Vicki, when I first met you, people who know you through knowing your company, Schneps Media. Some people suggested, I think her husband founded the business and so on and so forth. There's all these things that nobody even knows what they're talking about, but just that's cultural, right? People, it's biases, right? And so the biases lead what our beliefs are, even if they're false. And so I want to start by talking about, in our discussion in preparing for this, you mentioned that you were a school teacher initially, and you had this ideal lifestyle in your head that you were going to embark on when you married a lawyer. You were going to move to the suburbs, have a white picket fence, and let's talk about how that dream turned into something entirely different and evolved into Schneps Media.
Well, that was a journey, and I guess life is a great adventure. I've learned that, and I think anyone who doesn't realize that. What do they say? That man plans and God
laughs. God laughs. Right.
That's very true of my life, because I wanted to be a teacher since second grade teacher, Mrs. Boroff. I fell in love with her, and I always wanted to be just like her. So I got my master's degree in teaching, and my firstborn daughter, Lara, who came to me 5 years after I was married, so she was a great joy to be arriving. I had a very difficult delivery, and within hours of her cesarean birth, she turned blue in the nursery, and they didn't catch it fast enough, although she was discharged as being perfect, which she looked perfect. She, in fact, showed no development. And after 3 months of seeing her twitching her eyes, my doctor saw it and sent us to the hospital right from his office, because it turned out those were seizures. And then the journey for a cure began. And when there was no cure, one of the pediatric neurologists said to me, "You've got to come to the realization she'll always be a 3-month-old." And being an optimist by nature, I said, well, we've got to find help. And so we found a place that is on Staten Island. It was called the Willowbrook State School, but they had just built an infant rehabilitation center. And I lived in Bayside, and my lovely friends, beautiful friends, all college graduates, but they were doing what they call charity work. And they came to me and said, "Look, Vicki, can we help there? But for the grace of God, we've got healthy children and we want to help." So we created the Women's Organization for Retarded Children in 1971.
Which is known as WORK, just for everyone listening, right? WORK.
Right. Today is called Life's Work. The name evolved, but the lovely ladies and I, of course, I visited my daughter every week, and they, volunteered and raised money for Willowbrook. But within a year, of Lara being at Willowbrook, Governor Rockefeller slashed the budgets of the direct care workers were fired. And Lara, who's somebody who needed to be fed, she needed to be diapered, she needed to be turned because she couldn't sit up herself. And the people with her, there were 5,400 people lived at Willowbrook. Let's see, about 132-acre property. Were, many of them having different kinds of special needs, were all affected. And my lovely ladies and I became marchers and picketers. And we marched and picketed, but my husband was a lawyer. And he said, this place will never be any good. We've got to close it down and have a class action lawsuit filed. In the meantime, Geraldo Rivera, a cub reporter at Eyewitness News, was snuck in to Willowbrook. And his coverage, when he said, I could show you the pictures, I could let you hear the moaning sounds of the people. But how do I describe the smell?
It was just at the time that I met Geraldo Rivera, who was a cub reporter with Eyewitness News and had come because a doctor he knew snuck him into the back wards. And to this day, I can remember Geraldo's words.
This is what it looked like, this is what it sounded like, but how can I tell you about the way it smelled?
That was what it was all about. And my husband was right. And we did file a federal class action lawsuit, and we won the lawsuit. Willowbrook was closed down, and in its place, group homes opened in the community for the people who lived at Willowbrook and people in the community. And my life's work changed its mission from fundraising to operating. And we opened the very first group home for children in New York State in a beautiful home in Little Neck, Queens. But the neighbors didn't want us, and they sued us. And I had death threats. I had to take my Schneps license plates off the car. NIMBY, not in my block.
Not in my backyard. Yeah, exactly.
Not in my backyard.
Yeah.
And so we won that lawsuit. And I'm happy to tell you that when I brought the people who fought us, who filed the lawsuit to the house the day we opened, they looked around and they said, oh, this is what you were talking about? This is very nice.
And the first group home we opened in Little Neck, we bought the house with the money that Geraldo raised at the John Lennon Yoko Ono concert. And we had the money to buy the house. That opened the door for where group homes could be. And so the first group home, we had to name it in honor of Geraldo Rivera. And to this day, it's the Geraldo Rivera Group Home. It's our first, it's our gem, it's our jewel in our crown.
And in fact, one of the neighbor's children used to volunteer in the house and became a social worker herself. So, it evolved. And now Life's Work is a $70 million nonprofit that provides group homes, 49 of them in Nassau, Suffolk, Queens, Manhattan, and provides over 2,000 people with services. So, it evolved. And my husband, I was always a volunteer, said to me one day, it's about time you made some money.
You told me that.
I met this wonderful man who had taken a buyout from the Daily News, John Toscano, and he had started a paper in Astoria. And I always had the bug after I met Geraldo with being in the news business, because he had the power of the press. His expose helped propel the parents to sign on for the lawsuit.
And propelled Schneps Media, because he was the catalyst.
I said,
right?
one day I'd like to be in the media business. And there I was. But it was a very simple beginning, Jonathan. He worked from his house. I worked from my house. We wrote every article. We invested
You started in your living room, right, in Bayside.
My newspaper odyssey began with Geraldo. When we were marching and picketing, my lovely ladies and I, we were knocking on air. Nobody listened. It wasn't until Geraldo came repeatedly back to Willowbrook that the power of the press truly moved this movement forward. And I never forgot that. And I said, someday I'd like to be in that news business. So 3 children later, now's my time. I met this man who'd take a buyout from the Daily News. He started a paper in Astoria. And I said, I think we could start a neighborhood newspaper right here in Bayside. And so we started in my living room with one newspaper. We wrote every story, we took every picture, and we even went with the boards in those days. You put your news strips on a board and you bring the board to the printer. And I still picture the day at 2 o'clock in the morning. We finally finished the paper and the boards were ready. And we went to Long Island City to get it on the web presses, these massive presses.
The same sofa that I started life's work.
Right. And we both, our origins, it's funny how life goes full circle. I was born and raised in Bayside, and you're from Bayside, and we have some mutual connections we've discovered over the years.
Yes.
But the paper originally was called the Queen's Courier, right?
It still is.
And
40
it was
years strong, we're celebrating.
and the Bayside Times was the big publication.
Well, they were my competitor.
Yeah.
But I ultimately bought them as well because, I started 12 papers from scratch. Seeing a need in a neighborhood, I even started a Spanish language newspaper from scratch. And when my son joined me after I owned 12 newspapers, he was an investment banker. And Josh said to me one night, Mom, if I'm going to work 24/7, can I come work for you? I never
That's
would
great.
ask my children. I had 3 more children, and I would never ask them to get in the business because, it's a passion play. I never expected
100%.
to make. Yeah, I never expected to make money. I never, to this day, I have no idea how much money I make. I just know we pay the bills.
Right. You
So
pay the
that's all
bills,
I need to know.
and you're living your passion, your work. Let's talk about in the last decade or so, you've made quite a number of acquisitions, and I want to talk about some of those acquisitions, like the papers, for example, and how what was the catalyst, right, for all these acquisitions, and then two, talk about the culture that you have of events and how that evolved and how they work together to attract all of these publications who are looking for a home with you, and why.
Well, we had 12. I had 12 media outlets, and we got a call from a broker that there was a paper available in Brooklyn. And my son brought that idea to me, and I said, "What do we need it for?" We're doing great here in Queens. I said, "What neighborhood is it?" So he said, "Bay Ridge." I said, "Oh, Bay Ridge." I always wanted to live in Bay Ridge, but it was the wrong subway line for my parents. When I got married, I was in college. I didn't have a car, and I had to go on the subway to see my parents, and I couldn't see my parents from Bay Ridge, so I couldn't buy that apartment or rent that apartment. But I knew Bay Ridge was always a fabulous neighborhood. And so we went to visit it, and we saw that the neighborhood was just around 9/11. And I had said to the publisher, "You must have gone to a lot of funerals of people, firefighters and policemen." He says, "Oh, no, no." He says, "This is Cantor Fitzgerald neighborhood. We had terrible problem because all the people lives were destroyed by 9/11." And so I turned to my son when he left. He says, "Cantor Fitzgerald people? Okay, we're buying it." Because I understood that if there are people who can afford to buy things, we could sell advertising. And the advertising is what supports the newspaper because most of our newspapers are free. They are selected to be picked up. And so that was our first acquisition in Brooklyn. And we owned the papers in Bay Ridge and Sunset Park and Dyker Heights and Bensonhurst. And so we began acquisitions.
and
And that
and you
worked out. So we started another acquisition.
Right. And you mentioned that one of the reasons, I asked you yesterday what separated you from your competitors as it relates to being able to track these acquisitions to Schneps, and you said they're really seeking you out because of the care and the whole connection between the events and the papers and how it all kind of works together to nurture what they created, and they felt comfortable that you would be able to continue their legacy, not destroy it.
Yes, well, we are, my son and I, passionate about serving the community. We're not a political entity, we're an advocacy because of my own background in advocacy. And many people who own these community newspapers, and that's what we are, we're community newspaper journalists, are family owned. And when they are not going to continue, they want someone who will continue with the quality that they believe they need to have for their neighborhood. And we were chosen the number one newspaper media company in New York State by our peers. So we're very proud of that acknowledgement. And we were chosen
You
one of the
should
top
be.
10 newspapers in the United States of America. So, we developed a reputation of quality. And that really, I think, is what made people come to us. And that's what happened with Dan's papers. We had bought the family magazines in New York, and the owner of that also owned Dan's papers. And he called me one night and said, Vicki, my wife wants to live in New Jersey. I've owned Dan's for 10 years. I've got to, I've got to exit. I've got to keep my marriage, and I've got to, would you and Josh consider buying Dan's papers? And that was just at the end of COVID. It was 5 years ago in 2020, 2021. So, that
2021,
was
yeah.
something that I knew because Josh's father, my first husband, Murray, was an attorney in Riverhead in the
Yeah.
70s and 80s and 90s. So I knew the neighborhood was fabulous neighborhoods. I knew, the quality of the readership. And so when Josh said to me, well, what do you think, Mom? Should we buy it? I said, of course we should buy it.
Yeah.
And I just, it was a diamond in the rough because it hadn't been loved.
Well,
And
but
one of the
you
things I
have
could
an
tell you
eye
we
for it,
loved.
right? Someone didn't teach you that. You had an eye and an instinct that told you that. You couldn't prove it, right?
Right. No.
But your instinct in this regard is something I think that's played an important role in the success you have.
Well, my son and I are both, Josh is very creative also. And we often laugh and we think we have attention deficit because we create one thing and we're ready to create the next.
Well, I have to say, your your reputation in the community it reflects everything that you're talking about. And one of the things that you do is you do the Power Women, right? So, and I know you got that idea because you were at an event with a long dais and there were awards being given out, and you recognized there wasn't one award at the time being given to one woman. And so why don't you talk about that and the origin of Power Women, how that came about?
Well, I was at this event, this business chamber of commerce event. And when I saw that, I turned to my friend who was with the bank and I said, I'm going to start my own Power Women event. And I want to create an ultimate networking booklet for people to keep connected to each other. And she said, well, how much money do you need, Vicki? I said, well, probably printing will be about $1,500. And she worked for a bank. And she said, well, okay, just send me a bill. That's how business used to be done. Now you got
All
to put
right.
it through a whole proposal and do this and that.
The good old
So,
days.
we started, I'm not afraid to start from scratch and build something. And, I must tell you that my first event was top 10 women of Queens in
Nice.
business. And we've grown. Last night we had the Power Women of Long Island, and we honored 52 women.
Once you decided to create your own Power Women event, that you weren't going to discriminate against men who also should still be bestowed an honor when they deserve it. So you created something where Michael Bloomberg was the first inductee, I
King,
guess. Yep,
King. We
the
called them the
king.
Kings. The Kings of Queens was my first men's event. And
Yeah.
that was really people got a crown on their head and they got a robe and they got a scepter. But Michael
Although you
Bloomberg,
told me he wouldn't let you put the crown on his head for obvious reasons.
right. Well, it was the day he was going to announce the third year term, first time that mayors ran for 3 terms. And I had every media in the world at that event. And he says, you're going to kill me. Don't put that crown on my head. So, of course, I didn't. But, the point is that we created events for kings because we wanted to have something to salute the men. And from there, because of my Spanish paper, we had Hispanic awards. Then we had healthcare awards. Then when we acquired papers in Brooklyn, we had Brooklyn awards. And now we call it the Brooklyn Power List for the men and women. And we still have the Power Women events in every region where we have a media outlet. And, thanks to Josh, we are very savvy digitally. And we are, multiply platform business where we may have 101 newspapers, but we have 101 websites. And then we have a digital division. And then we have a social media division. And we are, now wherever there's happening AI, we're right there. So we've been very innovative in having many platforms. I do my own podcasts. We do webinars. We do streaming TV commercials and TV shows. So, we've learned that you cannot operate a business on just one platform.
Right.
And
And it
that's, when you
shows.
do investments, you do multiple. You don't invest all everybody's money in one product. Well, we don't invest our business in just one division. We have multiple divisions.
Right. Well, it's true, and even in terms of educating people about how we can help them, we don't have one platform, right? So me meeting with someone, explaining it as one platform. Me creating newsletters, right, to educate people about we're specialists in behavior, about what's going on with the tariffs and what it means and what you should or shouldn't do. And then I have the podcast, right? So there's all different ways. I call the when we talk about behavioral, and you've worked with me, so you understand what I mean when we work behaviorally. So at the end of the day, when people take vitamin C, the vitamin C, if you don't take it the next day, it does you no good. It's soluble, disappears. And it's the same thing when somebody's reflecting on the tariffs and, gee, I'm going to change my portfolio. And then I talk to them and talk sense into them and get their temperament steely so that they don't react to the fear. They can feel the fear, but don't respond. But some people, I call my newsletters my vitamin C, because as soon as they leave my call and turn on the poison on CNBC, my vitamin C leaves them, right? So the newsletters are the vitamin C, but then people sometimes don't like to read, to your point. So I came up with the podcast. That's like my intravenous vitamin C, right? For those who don't like to read. But it's the same concept, right? You have to figure out that everybody doesn't receive information the same way, doesn't respond to things the same way. And that's what you're talking about with the digital. And you also have now 50 events, right? 50 different events. And so what gave you the idea that the events would really bond so well with the press, right? To really boost your organization to what it is, because you're not just press, you're not just writing stories. It's a whole ecosystem, is the way I describe it. One feeds off the other.
Our theme, Jonathan, is we're all about you. So if you think about being all about you, there are many facets to you. And so with community journalism, we're talking about the people who make the communities great. And it was natural for us to create these events around our media and the locations where our media is. So that really propelled us to have the papers be a springboard to our events. So when we bought Dan's papers, we do Dan's Power Women, and we do Dan's Power List, and we do Dan's food events and Dan's Taste of the Hamptons. And we evolved from that. And now we're doing something new, which is called Schneps Connects, where we're blessed to have a breakfast where we bring together a smaller group. Because last night we must have had about 500 people at Crest Hollow.
Right.
We have here, a breakfast was launching with Schneps Connects with smaller groups, more intimate. And we're going to have a guest speaker, Jim McCann, who founded 1-800-Flowers, talk about AI impacting his business and how he's using it. So, we're always evolving and things kind of fit. It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle.
Well,
One
you know what?
fits into the other.
You have the value of all the connections, to use Schneps Connect, right, that you've created over the years. People who were honorees, thousands of them, you said, and now you came up with this idea with these events and let all of these thousands of people who were at one point or other recipients of one of the Schneps Media Awards to connect with each other, right? Why lose the connection? They all have that in common, right? That Schneps Media recognition. And so now
Well, I just want to add something in there because it's very important that because of my own advocacy work, at every event we hold, we identify a nonprofit organization and we do a raffle at the event and raise thousands of dollars at every single one of our events that we then give to the recipients of that night. And we do a video to let people in the audience know who they are and promote the nonprofit world. So that's a big piece of my business and my nonprofit world coming together.
Let me ask you a question that's very interesting. How do you identify at which event, which nonprofit becomes the recipient at that event?
Many times it'll be groups we know. In some cases, it'll be things that come to our attention. We have a committee of our events division where people will pitch different organizations to be honored and to be the recipient of the donations. And they all tend to be within that neighborhood of where the event is. So, last night, for instance, we gave money to the Tiegerman School. She has a school in Glen Cove for children with autism and special needs. We gave money to Paws of War, where they help veterans who have suffered from the war. And so, we are very judicious about keeping it local.
Well, I'm going to encourage you to consider at some point, because it hits home for both of us. The organization that I'm involved with, the Sunrise Day Camps, it's underprivileged children with cancer, and their siblings get to go to camp for the summer. And
That's a
it's
fact.
just
So they go with the siblings and the
yeah.
child
So
who has the cancer?
yep. So let me explain how Arnie Preminger, who founded it, who used to work for JCC in Oceanside, right, as a senior person, what he figured out is not just that these poor kids have something that they could never imagine going on in their life. This gives them a summer of sunshine through through all those clouds. But he also recognized these are underprivileged families, so the parents needed to take care of the other siblings who didn't have cancer, but they couldn't afford to not go to work and so forth. So by sending the siblings along with he helps the whole family, right? And it's such a beautiful, so I'll educate you, and it's local. So it's a beautiful organization. And when we
Well,
go and
definitely should
volunteer,
be.
yes,
Yes.
it's wonderful. But before we close in the next few minutes, I wanted to talk about a couple of things. One is Lara, your daughter, right, who was the reason that really that all this happened. Out of tragedy came a legacy for her, right? That she really was responsible for, and something great came out of it for a lot of families and people who are unfortunately similarly situated. But also, one of the things I talked to you about on the phone is I'm always a big believer. My father was paralyzed when I was 11. He had rheumatic fever, which caused a clot, and had a stroke. Then he passed away when I was 13. And I wasn't, my mom was not the favorite of her parents. So my grandparents favored my cousins and always told me, yeah, you should be a Spanish teacher. You're not really meant to do anything, more than that. And so that kind of motivated me, and all of the challenges I had as a child motivated me. So out of something bad did come something good. I help a lot of people today. I'm proud of what we do for our clients, and I find the same is true of you. You had adversity, and it didn't only catalyze the idea to start to go into media and take advantage of that voice for others' benefit, right? For as you said, for you, we're about you. But it also motivates you. It motivates you to continue to succeed. It's not about money at this point for you and not for me. It's much more than that. So I want you to talk a little bit about that. And I also want you to talk about, lastly, what's the magic? You were a school teacher. You never had any formal training in media. You didn't have any formal training in business. So it can't all be luck. And we all have some luck in life, right? Luck is just outside factors that influence the outcomes that we have no control of. But that's not all of it. So I want you to talk about those couple of things.
Well, I think, when Lara was born, you can't see into the future. You can only live in the moment. And she propelled me into another life. And she propelled me to use skills I realized I didn't know I had.
Right.
And being able to really engage people to help me and help Lara and all the other Laras of the world was something that just by doing, I learned. And I think being able to do is sometimes we challenge ourselves where we don't know that we have the capacity to do it. And we are, sometimes people, I'll never forget, Lara passed away when she was 17. And somebody came to the funeral and said to me, "Oh, it's for the best." I said, "For the best?" Lara taught me more than any other person on earth. She brought me to where I am today. She enabled me to help her and to help so many more people. And sometimes we don't understand that somebody who's different is very special. I call people with special needs, and these people who have the special needs give us something very special. Lara was my heart, my soul, my pain, but that's
Right.
life. That's
That's
what
life.
life is
Right.
all about. And
Look,
she
my
opened the
father
door.
was one of my biggest motivators, right? As much as he was paralyzed, he was this, he was that. He was still to this day one of my biggest motivators, and he's been gone for the large majority of my life. So I get it, and you learn experientially, right? I mean, that's the best way to learn. That's how you've learned, and you make mistakes. But one of the things they always say is experience is among the cruelest teachers, because it gives us the test first and only later gives us the lesson. But the strongest people still thrive from that, I think.
Well, I believe also that I've been blessed to have great people around me. And I think that helps make who I am. I may be the leader, the motivator, but you've got to have great people around you to innovate. And I was blessed that my son is as hardworking as I am. Nothing beats hard work, but I'm in a
Yep.
position where I never know, Jonathan, am I working or is this play? I don't know. To me, it's like interchangeable.
I'm like you. I love what I do. When I sit with you in your house and go over what we're talking about, planning and so forth, and you say to me, that's interesting. That makes a lot of sense. That's my passion. It wasn't hard work. That's not hard work for me. When I do my podcast, not this kind, like an interview, this is wonderful, but my short versions where I teach people about a faulty reasoning process we have when money and uncertainty collide and how to overcome it once you identify. That's not what. Yeah, I'm with you. We're in the same boat
But I
in that
think that's
regard.
a key to success. I think a key to success is doing what you love and love what you're doing.
So my daughter, who sleeps to 2 p.m. again because she loves it, must be very successful. I just haven't seen it yet.
Well, some people evolve at different times of their lives.
No,
I
she's
think,
doing well on her own schedule. She's doing well.
yeah, well, I think everybody has their own rhythm. And I do believe that one of the keys to my success has having great people around me, including, starting with my son. And then one of the things that happened with my acquisitions is that I got the greatest people that ran companies.
To
And in
become
one
part of your
case,
company, right?
to
Yeah.
become part of my company.
Yep.
In one case, we were acquired a company from Newsday, actually, and they were losing a lot of money. And they, asked us to challenge us if we wanted it. And I said, sure, we'll work with it. Well, we went and we interviewed everybody. We fired everyone because we realized why they were losing money. But we acquired their competitor, and there was stars after stars after stars. So we combined the two, and it worked out great. But you have to identify where the stars are and nurture them and encourage them,
Right.
because we can't be in this world alone.
100%. But by the way, I want to end by one, thanking you so much. This was fun, and two, I want to make sure that we remind everybody about Life's Work, WRC. You could talk about the upcoming event. I want to remind everybody about Schneps Connect, and locally, certainly in our area, Woodbury, Syosset, all over Long Island, Dan's Papers, and Long Island Press, right? It's always available. You see it in the supermarkets, you see it everywhere. So those who haven't, for some reason, just understand it's available. As Vicki said, it's not something that's charged for. It's supported by advertising. But
Well, we
with
do
that,
have
Vicki,
one. We do have one group that is subscription based, because we just acquired a year ago the Anton papers and the Blank Slate papers. So we own the papers in Great Neck, Manhasset, Port Washington,
okay.
Roslyn, Glen Cove, Oyster Bay, Syosset, Plainview,
I feel like I'm on the
Massapequa,
Long Island Railroad.
right? Just on the southern part, Mineola, New Hyde Park. We're very blessed to have every neighborhood covered, but those are subscription based media. But I think one of the things I'm looking for is for Life's Work. We're expanding our board of people who are influencers and looking for people who are the CEOs or the CFOs or the COOs of their company to lend their expertise, because Life's Work is a $70 million agency that needs very savvy business people on their board. So, if
Okay, so
anyone is
I'm going to
interested,
share
they
that
can
with
go
some
see you.
people I know in a particular networking group that where they're CEOs. So I'll share that, And anything else you want to emphasize before we sign off?
Well, I just think it's important to support community journalism because we are the voice of the community. And we always encourage local businesses to work with us because we reach their potential clients with a quality media on multiple platforms of print, digital, events, and broadcasting.
All right. And I can kind of confirm that because you're my customer and I'm your customer. So we
Love it.
we
Love it.
support it. All right. So listen, really love you, Vicki. Thanks so much for coming on today. And I really had a great time. And everybody who's listening, thanks again for listening to Crazy Wealthy podcast. You can get us on Apple, Spotify, all your favorite venues, as well as our website, crazywealthypodcast.com and fusionfamilywealth.com. And take a look at Schneps Media website. And there's a video at the end of the website where Vicki's talking about the Lara experience, and Geraldo Rivera's on it. I recommend everybody take a few minutes and watch it. It's I enjoyed it myself very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Have a great week.
Thanks, Vicki. Okay.
I am so proud of my relationship with Vicki. She is caring, confident, competent. She's amazing, and I love her.
Stay tuned to hear Amy's call-in for the recap of today's episode.
Good afternoon, hon. How are you today?
Hi, honey. I'm good. We're doing well.
So I know you were doing a podcast today with Vicki Schneps, who has been so generous with rewarding me with the Power Women Award one year. And she's also been very generous with you, and she's a good friend to both of us. So I wanted to hear if you heard anything new from her that we don't know from her personally.
I learned a lot new. I always liked Vicki, but now I love Vicki. It was a great interview. And I think not only did I learn so much, but I think when this podcast drops shortly in the next week or so, the whole community, anyone who takes the time to listen, is going to learn things that they never knew about the person who's behind the media queen, as I call her.
Well, tell me what you learned new. I know she had a special needs child, and that's what caused her to become an advocate for other special needs children. But what led her into Schneps Media?
Now, it's much deeper than that. So her daughter, Lara, was born cesarean section. There was an issue. They didn't realize there was an issue. And a few months later, her eyes were twitching, and the pediatrician discovered that essentially she told Vicki she's always going to be a 3-month-old, and it was heartbreaking. So Vicki didn't want to accept that, so she looked for solutions. She found this institution, Willowbrook, which was a big state school that just had this, I think, pediatric division that was relatively new. But apparently once her daughter Lara was there, it really became dilapidated. And what happened was it was to the point where she wasn't getting care. It was dangerous for her to be there. So Vicki was married to a lawyer. The lawyer said, in short, Vicki, they got to shut this place down. There's no other solution. So what was interesting is Vicki said they snuck into the to the Willowbrook State School, who was then a Cub reporter, Geraldo Rivera.
Wow! I know him.
And so he went in, and he went in, and he said, by reporting on it, it was eyewitness news, right? So a lot of people listening to this from our generation certainly know eyewitness news. And he went in, and it was eyewitness. He said, I can show you the conditions, I can let you hear the screams, but I have no way to describe the smell. And when you listen to the podcast, I have a snippet from that tape with Geraldo back then. But in any event, so what happened with Vicki, she became an advocate after that. Because of Geraldo's work, they were able to win, commence and win a class action suit, get the place shut down, and then Vicki started an organization with her friends back then, who were women who were educated, but who she described were in charity. So they said, well, we're blessed. We don't have your situation. We want to help. So they created an organization that's now called Life's Work, but it's called WORC Work.
Yep.
A women's organization Foundation for Retarded Children, and they've grown to a $70 million nonprofit with about 50 group homes serving 2,000 people. This all started because of Geraldo coming in and her daughter Lara. But what's really fascinating is it's because of the power of what she saw media could do for advocacy, for children, for everything, that she became impassioned with the idea that I need to go into media. She was a school teacher. She had no formal business training and no media training. And she started Schneps Media back then in her living room on a couch.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, back in the day, I don't know if you told anyone her age, or she's in her 8th decade, let's put it that way. And she is
They
just
also say that she's an octogenarian.
right. She's a power monster. She really commands a room, and she has the respect of everyone. And she's a shrewd businesswoman, and that was very rare back in the day to go do that on your own.
Well, she learned it experientially. When I asked her what her secret is, she said, Jonathan, you've got to love what you do and you do what you love. And the other secret is surround yourself with good people. So I talked to her about all her acquisitions recently, like Dan's Papers and a whole bunch of others, and why they're attracted to her company as a buyer. And she said it's because we're about, she said, you, Y-O-U. And she said they know that we care and that we wouldn't destroy their legacy. We'd carry it on and perpetuate it. And so all of these people, she said, seek her out. But what she said is when she buys, like she bought this failing unit from Newsday. And when she bought it, she recognized why it was failing. She said she had to fire everybody. And then there was another media company that she bought, subsidiary from another company, that had stars, as she described it. She said, I merged the failing Newsday company into the one with the stars, and it took off. And she said it's all about making sure you get as many stars as you possible. So when she buys a company, she's not just buying the company, she's buying the people.
Yeah, well, one of the great papers that she bought, personally to me, is, in all our years of coming out to the Hamptons, was Dan's Papers. And that was always what I wanted to grab when I walked into a store in Montauk or in East Hampton. And, she's taken that paper to a whole other level.
Yeah, no, she's done that with her organization. And she really, to his credit, she tells me, she didn't want her other 3 children. Lara passed away at 17, the daughter that was in Willowbrook, but her other 3 children, to force them into the business. She said, because she believes, like I do, you have to be passionate. You can't just go into a business. You have to do what you love and love what you do. But she said Josh works as hard as he does, and thank goodness he's also savvy with the digital media and the webinars, and they have a podcast. So she really couldn't talk enough about how wonderful Josh is and how additive he's been to the company, not because he's her son, but because of his work ethic and his creativity. So that was nice to hear. But I'll say one of the things that's on her Schneps Media website is a video at the end of one of the pages about the company. And when you hear the end of the video, it's Geraldo Rivera, and he says about Vicki, she's confident, she's competent, she's caring, and I love her. And I have to tell you, after I did the podcast, I shared some of those sentiments about Vicki. And
well, I'm
the funny thing is,
looking forward to hearing it.
I went to an event last week, and during the podcast, I said to her, I've met people who know your company, and I've met more than one person who said, yeah, I think her husband started it, which couldn't be farther from the truth. And then I went out a week after, or 2 weeks after we recorded the podcast, and one of a former partner from one of the big Long Island accounting firms said to me, how's your podcast going? And I said, I just recorded one with Vicki. It was really good, Vicki Schneps. He said, oh, yeah, her husband started the company, didn't he? It's just like literally just happened.
Right. It's such a chauvinistic way of thinking. And what's interesting is that she is now, it's almost like the opposite. Now she's put it in the hands, second generation, of her son. So it's the opposite of what you usually see.
She did that, and the other thing that was nice is the way Power Women was born is she was at this big event, and Chamber of Commerce, I think, event. And there was a big dais of people who were getting awards, and it was all men getting awards, no women. So she said, well, I'm going to create my own women awards, my own power women. And she did it. And I think initially there was 10, and it just grew to this monumental power women, power dance power. There's all kinds of power events. But then she said, but I wasn't going to be chauvinistic. I felt that if there were men who were deserving of the awards, they should also be bestowed an award. So she created something called the Kings and the Kings and Queens. And the first recipient was Michael Bloomberg. He was running for his third term of mayor. And so she's friends with him. And she said, he wouldn't let me put the crown. I said, of course I won't put the crown on, because she said every media company in the world, basically the way she described it, was at this event, and she didn't want him to be embarrassed, obviously wearing a crown because he's coming to mayor. But I then reminded her, we weren't online when I reminded her, but about 2 or 3 years ago, Mike Bloomberg, I guess she was.
Oh, I remember this. Yep.
Right.
I remember
and
this.
She said, Jonathan, I think we should sell stocks. I said, why? Well, I ran into Mike Bloomberg, and he's telling me we're going to have a recession. And I said to her back then, I'll never forget, it was the recession that people started predicting was around the corner in 2022, and then again in 23, and again in 24. I called it the Godot recession, waiting for Godot, because it never came. And I said to her, Vicki, I couldn't ever dream of becoming a fraction as successful as Michael Bloomberg. And he probably knows more about disseminating news information in the financial area than anybody else. That's his business. He's not qualified to give advice to investors on personal wealth. And so I'm going to tell you, no, you don't respond to his thought about the recession coming, because I call that the illusion of predictive value, because he predicts it with his education and background, or you predict it, or I do. The outcome is not likely to reflect what we're predicting, right? Period. And so she'd listened, and if she had listened, she would have sold stocks that are now up about 50% since then, just a couple of years ago.
It's amazing. One thing I remember, besides her being a bulldog and a great business person, but I remember once, she told me a story that when everything started happening with her daughter, and she was being an advocate, she had to get rid of her Schneps license plates. And the same thing happened to me, but for a very different reason. I thought it was going to cost you business, because I was driving around these license plates.
Because one of my key clients said, does your wife have a such and such car? I said, why? He said, yeah, because I saw her going about 80 miles an hour, and she went over the divider on Jericho Turnpike. I said, that's what I said, Amy, get rid of those nameplates.
Yeah, so that I wish I was, 1/3 as shrewd as she was, but that's definitely something that connected us. Anyway,
yes.
I am going to sign off now. And hope everyone loved the podcast. And I can't wait to listen to it and hear everything new you learned about Vicki that we don't already know. But she's a great person, a great woman, and everyone should support her advocacy charity.
All right, sweetie.
Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Crazy Wealthy Podcast. For more insights, resources, and to sign up for our newsletter, visit crazywealthypodcast.com. Until then, stay crazy wealthy.
The previous podcast by Fusion Family Wealth, LLC, Fusion, was intended for general information purposes only. No portion of the podcast serves as the receipt of or as a substitute for personalized investment advice from Fusion or any other investment professional of your choosing. Different types of investments involve varying degrees of risk, and it should not be assumed that future performance of any specific investment or investment strategy or any non-investment related or planning services, discussion, or content will be profitable, be suitable for your portfolio or individual situation. Neither Fusion's investment advisor registration status nor any amount of prior experience or success should be construed that a certain level of results or satisfaction will be achieved if Fusion is engaged or continues to be engaged to provide investment advisory services. Fusion is neither a law firm nor accounting firm, and no portion of its services should be construed as legal or accounting advice. No portion of the video content should be construed by a client or prospective client as a guarantee that he or she will experience a certain level of results if Fusion is engaged or continues to be engaged to provide investment advisory services. A copy of Fusion's current written disclosure brochure discussing our advisory services and fees is available upon request or at www.fusionfamilywealth.com.